Hypernova has been described by many in the Indian game development scene as one of the most exciting game studios here in India. CEO Mayur Bhimjiyani got his start at game studios such as Zynga and Mooncube before founding Hypernova in 2015. Today, we discuss Mayur's journey, the founding of Hypernova, creating a GTA for India, and the opportunities and challenges in game development here in India. Welcome, Mayur. So I've been told by a number of folks here in the Indian game development scene that you guys, Hypernova, are the ones to watch out for, that you guys are doing great work. I've seen the trailer for your game, which looks very impressive, but could we talk about this perception behind Hypernova? Why do you think people have such a positive image of Hypernova? What are you guys doing really well?
So firstly, thank you so much for having me here, Joseph.
No, welcome.
And letting me talk about what we're doing and our game. So we started Hypernova as a small dream,
Okay.
where we wanted to make larger than life games for mobile. And that's what really helped, drive our vision as well. I started it with a very old friend of mine, Josefa, way back when in 2015. So at that point, we were probably one of the few companies in India that was started by two game designers. Generally it's product guys that you've seen in the Indian space start some companies, or even engineering guys teaming up with few folks. But we were a design-centric, design-first sort of a company.
Okay.
And that just spoke through all of our work, where whatever games we made, we were very on point on. We need to make sure that the fun for the player is put first.
Okay.
And that trickled down all the way into our hiring, where if you can't talk about your favorite game for a couple of hours, we won't even consider you for an interview.
I see.
So we were very careful from day zero to think about talent density and building a team that can deliver some great games first. Because yes, you have to first make games and then sell them. If you have a great game, the selling becomes a lot easier. So always the idea was, player comes first, you put the fun first, and we are an entertainment company.
Sure.
So that's what we have to put first. That's what our thinking has always been, where we use technology to deliver entertainment, and we are not a technology startup. We are an entertainment startup,
Right.
Through and through, and that's been our philosophy from day zero.
Okay. But in terms of like the positive perception about Hypernova, do you think that comes because of maybe some of the strength in design that you're talking about, or is it maybe because of the work you've done before at Zynga and people know you, or why do you think there is such positive sentiment towards Hypernova here in India?
I think it's largely to do with the consistency of our work.
Okay.
And the constant level of quality of whatever work we've done with whatever partners we've worked with, wherever we've delivered the kind of games we've made. So whenever we started making games, it was very rare to see high quality level of feedback games coming in.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, half the fun in the game is all about feedback, right? Like it's, how different is, say, a Ghost of Tsushima, where your slash of a sword feels a lot more satisfying versus a simple mobile game where you also just swing a sword with a 2D simple character.
Right.
But it's all about feedback, and how do you deliver that feedback when the player is trying to embody themselves in a virtual world. So I think it's largely to do with the quality and consistency of our work, and I've been blessed that I've been able to work with some phenomenal and very talented people for a very long time.
Great. So maybe we can talk about this game, and hopefully I pronounce it correctly, Mayanagari.
Yeah, it's called Mayanagari.
Close enough?
Yeah.
Mayanagari. Okay.
Yeah, correct.
So it's been described by a lot of people as GTA for India, but could you talk about, how did you come up with the concept, why this kind of a game for India, kind of the history behind, the decision to make this kind of game?
So we really started taking the India market very seriously in 2020, when we saw the kind of numbers PUBG was doing in India. And we were like, man, we are like fish in the ocean, that can't notice the water around it. Because up to that point, we are also largely focused towards the Western markets.
Right.
Because the India market was not mature enough at that point. It's very small. But then we had this insane trifecta in India of, Geo, then UPI, and what we call as production linked incentives, or PLI. For people who don't know, Geo is the largest telecom service provider now in the country and is responsible for India having, I think, the cheapest data rates in the world.
Right.
And then UPI, I think everybody knows globally, it's just changed the landscape of Indian finance and personal finance in India.
Right.
For an average Indian in a very significant and impactful way in the last few years. But for our industry, the real upswing started coming in for the Indian market, I think, when the government introduced production-linked incentives for electronics manufacturing in the country.
Okay.
Which allowed for a lot of the phone manufacturers, and it incentivized them to build their phones in India. Because India has quite high import tariffs on electronics in general.
Okay.
It's cheaper for you to go fly to Dubai, buy an iPhone 14 Pro Max and fly back than to buy an iPhone 14 Pro Max in India.
Right.
So that's the kind of tariff structure we have in India. But because the government incentivized a lot of these hardware manufacturers to come set up shop here, the phone prices dropped significantly, and which is why you saw this big upswing in large-scale 3D games like PUBG, Free Fire,
right.
And Genshin Impact also did, I think, decently well in India. Because now there are devices that can actually support 3D and immersive worlds in India, and that number's still rising very high as to what the threshold of the GPUs and CPUs are on a $150 or a 12,000 rupee phone here in the country.
Right.
So that was a big turning point for us. That, okay, the field is set.
Yeah.
Now what do we want to build? There we had three main things we were looking at, the whatever product we wanted to choose to build from that lens. Number one was, the whatever format we go after, because Indian audiences have not seen any Indian games, right? Our first and foremost focus was that we build games for India and by India.
Great.
Where, think about it this way, can you today imagine India's identity without Bollywood?
Right.
You cannot, right? If there were only English movies in India, how would India look like? Right? And I can't imagine in India like that. But that is the story today in terms of where the games industry is in India.
Yeah.
Where all the games we play are just from outside. So we realized that, there's a huge need for us to build something larger than life for Indian audiences. And we then looked at it from three core lenses. One was, has this game format already made a lot of money anywhere else? Right? Because the fun part is, games are very different than other forms of entertainment, right? Like, we work like software, we are extremely analytical in terms of how we can predict how something is doing in a market versus not doing something in the market. So, and plus, the other thing that we obviously understand as game creators is that games are language agnostic, right? They cross borders because they are all about agency, right? You're in a virtual world doing the actions, you are the player. And you are the one being powerful inside that virtual world, and that's the fantasy of entertainment that we are driving. So we wanted to find a game that had already done very well in multiple geographies and had made a lot of money already, right? Then we also then looked at what kind of traction this kind of game is getting in India. So when we try and define traction, we try and look at three things. One is the volume of people who are interested in this, right? Meaning downloads. Then we look at engagement. Okay, how much are those people engaging with this product on a given day, or how long are they engaging it for? And then we look at cultural relevance, like stuff like how much volume does this genre or game have in streaming, or what's the interest from game influencers and creators in this kind of game in the country. So we found some crazy insights when we were looking at the GTA genre. So we realized that, just to give you some current numbers on how that genre is doing in India, right? In the last 2 years, this genre has seen over 200 million downloads in India alone, which is like insane.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
And all of these are like extremely low production value, pretty, once you look at them, it'll look like you're playing a PS1 or maybe halfway between PS2 game. It's pretty low production value, barely any content, but insane number of downloads. Then we realized that the retention numbers are also off the charts, where people on average, we were seeing, 35 minutes being spent by people in the game on average in this genre per day in India, and extremely healthy, like day 1 and day 90 retention numbers. So for your audience who might not know what day 1 and day 90 means, basically how many people come after they've installed the game on the first day or the 90th day.
Right.
So those were extremely healthy for us. And then we finally looked at the cultural relevance of the game, and we realized that after PUBG and Free Fire, GTA was like the most streamed game in the country. In fact, GTA is probably the largest game in India outside of PUBG in terms of genre.
Okay.
Right. So we realized that people love talking about this stuff.
Right. And when you say GTA, is this all on PCs?
So it's PC as well as mobile.
Okay.
There's a lot of mobile-driven content that gets made on GTA-style games as well. When I say GTA, I'm not just talking about the franchise.
Right. You're talking about sort of that kind of game.
Yeah, that kind of game, right? That genre of games.
Okay.
So we realized, okay, there's phenomenal traction here. And then the third and the most important thing we wanted to look at, can we make this game truly Indian? Right, where you're not just putting a skin on top and saying, okay, hey, we're done. Right, you don't make Candy Crush Saga and make it. You don't take Candy Crush Saga and make it, Jalebi Crush Saga.
Sure.
Right, jalebi is like a Indian sweet. So that's not going to fly.
Yeah.
We need something where the stories can be Indian, the places can be Indian, the characters can be Indian, the music, the vehicles you ride, the weapons you shoot, all of that. Everything has to be Indian.
Nice.
And when we looked at these three things, okay, has it made money elsewhere? How is it doing in India in terms of already interest from audience, and what is the cultural relevance of this product?
Right.
So all three was like check. And then it was a no-brainer for us that, hey, there is an opportunity here, and it's been, I think, the dream of almost 90% of the people I've met in the game dev industry, in India at least, have wanted to make an open world game in their life at some point of time.
Sure.
So it's like it'll be a great talent magnet also for us as a product. So yeah, it was clearly a no-brainer for us. This would be the game that we want to go after.
Right.
And the other big thing we realized when we were looking at making something like this was two other things, where if we wanted to make a viable business out of it in India, we would have needed games that are very sticky and make the player stay for 3 months or longer, right? The pattern we've seen in India is that people are still coming out slowly out of that hesitation of paying for virtual or digital goods. So far, largely and historically, games have only monetized through ads, not so much from IAP, and that trend has started to change in the last few days. But our idea has been that if the player can stay with your game for longer, they will start feeling like the game is a part of their life more and more, and that hesitation for spending something that is virtual, that I cannot physically manifest in my life, that you can nip away at it. And if the player stays longer, the chance of them paying any money to your game even if it is 5 rupees, 10 rupees,
Right.
for something is much, much higher.
Right.
So we wanted something that was high shelf life, where we could actually get people coming in and staying for a long time. And the other thing, when we're looking at the streaming data, is when we realized that 90% of the content that you get that gets consumed on YouTube right now in India is non-English content.
Okay.
And game streaming is the fastest growing category on YouTube for the last few years, and I think this year it's inching closer towards almost 20% of content consumption in India.
Oh, wow.
So those were phenomenal numbers, and despite all of these things, we realized that there isn't a single game that allows game influencers to use that as a vehicle to connect with their desi janta even more, right? Like their desi audience even more. So quite a bit of factors, right? Like, but the idea is when you're spending 3 years of the prime of your life building something, you better be damn sure it's going to work out.
Right. And so in terms of stage of development, and maybe even rolling back a little bit earlier, so you founded Hypernova in 2015.
Yeah.
And you said you've been in development for 3 years, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
So can you speak a little bit about, okay, what did you initially do at Hypernova? And then after you've started your 3 years in, what is the current stage of development, kind of launch plans, things like that?
Right. So Hypernova was started with this, the classic first founder over-ambitious dream of making and chewing, way larger than you can swallow.
Sure.
With the goal of building a Dota style or a League of Legends style game for mobile, because that's the background I also come from.
Okay.
I used to be a esports athlete during 2007 through 2009.
Okay.
Playing.
For which game?
Yeah. So we had a team in Pune in Dota 1.
Oh, in Dota. Okay. Okay.
And for a phase, we were like the top seeded team in the country. So we've always been very close to esports, and we understood that this is the future, because at the end of the day, the name of the game for all content is very simple, right? Like your content needs to last, and you need to be able to get users in to watch your content for as cheap as possible, right? Like cost per install versus lifetime value.
Sure.
Right? Esports, by their own nature, the fact that they are multiplayer, that means endless content. And because it's a game where it's a tournament and there's glamour and glory, there is viewership and there is audience, and then there is endless content being created by streamers. So that was our initial thought process, and you will see a lot of the remnants of that thinking in Mayanagari's product vision as well, where we are looking at streaming data, how much people are talking about stuff. But unfortunately, at that point, India was very, very nascent as a market. We designed some crazy ass prototypes around the MOBA genre. This, lying on a dusty shelf somewhere inside my studio right now. But we weren't able to raise capital, so we pivoted. We made some action games, some casual action games for North American and Western European markets, a couple of multiplayer games. So that did well. That helped us raise our seed round at that point. And we had a few million downloads. We had some love from Google and Apple. We were featured. Most of our products were featured internationally by them, so we're getting
Great.
some love from them. But in 2018, I went through literally like the most difficult phase of my life, where I suffered a personal tragedy. And we were just a small team at that point, where we were just about 7 people. And I had mentally checked out of the business.
Oh, no.
Because it was just the most difficult thing I've ever faced in my life, where I lost my son, who was just 5 days old. So we ran out of money. That was the hard truth. And then we had a hard choice in front of us. Do we want to shut shop? Do we want to go home? Do you want to keep taking shots at the goal? What do you want to do? So one thing we realized at that point, that in games, they are so multidisciplinary. The most important thing is going to be making sure your team stays together for longer.
Yeah.
Only then you will have a chance of making something great. Because if however experienced a team might be, you just put them together in a year, nothing's going to happen. In game development at least, especially if you're trying to build some large scale IP products which are larger than life. So we were sure that we wanted to keep the team together. So we started doing services and started doing partnerships. So it was a hard rebuild for us from scratch. We did it in the same organization. And that business grew well for us for almost 3 years. We grew that 100% each year. We worked with, I think, at least 7 different unicorn startups to help them win games or gamified content. So that business was quite good, and all of the profits we made there, we poured back into first-party products.
Okay.
And in 2020, we started building this out, and in 2021, we realized, okay, we are at a stage where we can now do a hard pivot and go back to just building products and stop doing services. So we went out there, raised some money, and thankfully some good people backed us, and here we are.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing also about your personal life. That must have been really hard. But yeah, it
it's
shows
the most difficult thing we've done.
Yeah,
I've
I mean,
done.
that's like a true entrepreneur journey where you're going through a lot of hardships and able to overcome that. But maybe in terms of Mayanagari, in terms of the current stage and launch plans, could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So we've been making this for almost 3 years now, and we've just started the registration campaign for it on 16th of February.
Okay.
And the kind of response we've gotten from people is just overwhelmingly humbling. I have never seen so much positivity on any work I've ever done in my life. So
great.
I'm just so grateful that people have shown us so much love. So the game's going to come out this year in very soon. In 2023 is all I'm going to say for now publicly.
Yeah.
The idea is right now we are starting with a single player sandbox where players will be able to experience a great slice of our open world game, and fairly soon after that we are going to be launching multiplayer as well. Right now, since we started the registration campaign, it's just been crazy. We've started a creative program inside where we've brought in a lot of game influencers and creators who talk about different types of games on their platform to come and cover the game, talk about the game. And there we've been able to grow that to over 10 million YouTube subscribers internally.
Wow.
Where it's a pure partnership. We're not paying them any money because we don't want to pay any creators any money to review our game. We want whatever content we put out in front of our audience, at least, especially if it's through an influencer or a creator, to be transparent and honest. And it's not a paid promotion. We'll just invite you to come and play. If you like it, you like it. You don't like it, you don't like it. You just tell us what we should be improving.
Okay.
And we'll work on that.
Just to understand, so you started your own YouTube channel and you invited...
No, we didn't start our own YouTube channel. We started a program internally.
Okay. I see.
Where we've set up a creator council where we work with a select group of YouTube creators that have a reach of over 10 million YouTube subscribers.
I got it. Okay, cool.
Right.
Very cool. Yeah, and it seems like streamers are the new marketing now, right?
Absolutely.
It's all about streaming.
And it's more about product love, right? Because for a streamer or a content creator also, at the end of the day, what they are looking for is great content for their channel.
Right.
Right? What their audience might find relevant. And Mr. Beast says all YouTube cares about is the click-through rate and view finish percentage.
Right.
Like what's the view duration percentage where you're dropping out at, right? Like so that's all content creators really also want at the end of the day, where they get content where people are engaging with it and it's exciting and interesting for them. So we got a overwhelmingly positive response on another program we started last week. So this Thursday on 16th of March, we have a open creator playtest where we are inviting, it was an open application for YouTubers to come just try out our game, and if they want to cover it, they can cover it. So over 1,000 YouTubers have applied in the last 6 days, where the top 100 YouTubers have, I don't know, around 21 million subscribers between them.
Nice.
So it's been so overwhelmingly positive. It's like I'm at, for a lack of words there.
Okay. So many of the folks in the Gamemakers audience are executives, investors, product managers, folks like that. And so I think a lot of the questions that they probably would be interested in is around the monetization model. And certainly I think in the context not only of from a free-to-play monetization perspective, but also for India, you had mentioned monetization is changing. I also believe that a lot of the data tracking services have significantly underreported IAP spend in India. But can you talk about your thinking about monetization in India and then the specific approach that you're taking for monetization?
Right. So India is definitely changing. It's on a tear for the last few years.
Yes.
And which is what convinced me, hey, just jump in with both your feet and it's going to be all fine. And you learn how to swim in the deep end, it's okay. So our philosophy is fairly simple, where it's going to be difficult to monetize and grow just single player games at a very large scale in India and monetize them very well in India. Because what our insight has been that one of the things that still helps break that hesitation of spending on virtual goods is social proof or of that virtual item, right? Like whatever you're owning. And that's where IAP majority is spent. You're buying something virtually inside a game. But the fact that whatever you are buying, you can share it with your friends, you can show it off, or you can use it while fighting a friend or something along those lines where it's used in a social setting. That's the real key to unlocking player purchase at scale in India.
Okay.
So which is where our whole idea also was, we start with a single player open world sandbox and then we morph it into multiplayer. So our single player campaign is essentially my ad,
okay.
right? Because there are 200 other online multiplayer games out there. Why would players play one game versus another game, right? It's not just going to be about the theme, but also it's going to be about how good your gameplay experience is. So even if your gameplay experience is at the same level as other guys, then what's separating you?
Sure.
So that's how our thought process has been, where we make sure our cost per install is dirt cheap, right? Because that's what the equation is at the end of it. What is your cost per install versus what is your lifetime value? So by making sure we have a great original Indian product, our cost per installs are dirt cheap, and thankfully a lot of what creators are responding to right now is sort of pointing in that direction. And for your lifetime value, you need multiplayer content for sure. The player needs to stick around longer, and there needs to be a way for them to express social proof of whatever their virtual assets are.
Yeah.
That's going to drive the purchases a lot higher. And the other thing we've now realized, and this is an opportunity for our game specifically, might not be relevant for some of the other ones, is that a lot of brands are now more and more open to advertising inside virtual worlds, especially after people have started talking about metaverse,
Sure.
whatever that amorphous term may mean to people. But the idea being that people are aware that there are virtual worlds where people spend tons of hours each week and meaningfully connect with those worlds. So it's a great place for advertisers to advertise
Right.
as well. So we have great opportunities inside of our game where there are hoardings, like a GTA game in Mayanagari. We also have radio inside our car where we play Indian language music. There are 4 languages right now: Hindi, Punjabi, Telugu, and the last one was Bengali. So we have 4 languages right now where we have 4 different styles of music, and we can do audio ads there. And we're also doing a bunch of brand placements. That's like custom stuff we are doing. That's more of a B2B effort at our end rather than a straightforward solution for people. But the idea being, there are definitely a lot of avenues for you to monetize. You just have to pick the right way where you are going to be sure that, okay, this is the core of our hypothesis, and this is why this is going to work, right? Like for example, some casual games in India are also doing phenomenally well in terms of download and engagement, but the monetization levels at casuals is obviously much lower.
Okay.
Right. The genres we've seen monetize the highest in the last 5-6 years, action shooter games and strategy games have dominated like the top 10 grossing for the last 6-7 years in India consistently, along with a couple of casual games making it now and then there. So we were also plotting where the market is in terms of its maturity. So we realized when we were looking at China that initially there was a phase where casual and casino was all that was making money. Then they moved on to more shooter games, and then all that's shooter or strategy sort of games, and now all that's making the highest amount of money in China is RPG.
Right, or MOBA.
Right. Yeah. So what we realized is the market also takes time to mature. The average gamer also needs time to mature overall as a market, where they are initially maybe spending more time on casual stuff that does not require so much commitment from them.
Sure.
Now we are at a stage where we specifically chose a shooter because it follows a simple what you see is what you get design principle, where it's a gun, you pick up a gun, you shoot a person, right? It's a car, you get inside a car, you start driving a car, right? Like I don't need to teach you that you don't already know in your real life to be able to play the game. Like I'm going to cast a fireball that is going to be casted after 3 seconds of channel and going to damage this person for 5 seconds, and he's then going to get. You don't have to read 2 paragraphs. Right, to understand what are you going to do with a gun and a car. Right. So the market is at a phase where we see there's a big excitement around what you see, what you get games, and people are loving it. And in a few years' time, it will mature and it will evolve because people will then get bored of shooters, and they'll be like, give me something deeper.
Okay. And what is that deeper? Is it more the GTA type games, or how else do you think
it'll more be around RPG.
RPG.
Right. RPG are like the pinnacle of depth. You can go into 4x strategy. There's so much more you can do where you're spending 10 hours a day maybe playing a game. So RPG is what allows for that depth of experience to evolve from shooters to RPG. But I expect RPG games still in India will not have that kind of reach at least for the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because when you look at different countries, different cultures, different kinds of games are the most popular, right? So currently probably, China MOBAs. In the West, the Western markets, US has been dominated by shooter games. Yeah. Japan is all RPG, right? So yeah, it's interesting to try and understand how, I totally agree with your thesis that there's probably going to be a maturation of the audience. Looking for potentially different genres that become the dominant genre. But yeah, not knowing India well enough, it'd be interesting to see, is it more like the US where it shifts to shooters, or is it more like Japan where it's more RPG focused, or things like that? But
I think India is so large, there'll be lots of space for both of them. Sure. That's the fun part, where, one of the primary markets we are going to be promoting in a couple of months later, which is Uttar Pradesh, the largest population state in India.
Okay.
So UP is bigger than Russia in terms
Wow.
of population.
Nice.
UP is bigger than Brazil in terms of population. So
Right.
that's a fantastic market for a soft
Right,
launch.
right. I mean, I think the great thing about what you're doing and being in the Indian market and focusing on the Indian market is there's just so many tailwinds behind the increase, the growth of the GDP
Yeah.
in India, the rise of the middle class, more manufacturing being shifted to India. So there's all of these trends that you're going to be able to take advantage of.
Yeah.
But I thought maybe another question I could ask you as a games startup founder, CEO, in having experience working for a big established company like Zynga, but with an orientation at Zynga around live ops, for example. So live operations, maintaining a game versus building a new game. Can you talk about maybe some of the things that, were there things that you brought from Zynga? Were there approaches or ways of thinking you had to change in order to focus on new game development? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Right. So Zynga was quite fun. It was almost like my university, where when I joined, there were barely a couple dozen companies in the country making something in the games industry, and most of them were doing services of some kind,
Okay.
not product development. So Zynga was almost like my university, where the most important thing I learned there is design does not exist in vacuum. It has to work with business to make things happen. Otherwise,
Sure.
it's not design, it's art, right? And that's the most important thing I brought in Hypernova. But my core reason for, sort of moving out of Zynga India, at least at that point, was that we were largely a live operations unit here in India.
Sure.
As we have quite a few international gaming companies doing the same thing here. Some of them have now recently started original IP development in India as well. But in 2015, there's barely any original IP work happening in Zynga India. So I told my boss at that time, I am very tired of playing doctor. I want to try my hand at maybe playing a creator now and see how that works out. The place where we were at that point, where at that point I was leading Farmville as its lead designer. So the other big thing I learned at that point was don't put everything behind a paywall. Right? Like, because Zynga in that phase of its life as an organization was infamous for its quote unquote monetization tactics. And we were fortunate enough to work with a team where we reversed like a 5-year trend of downward decline on engagement revenue with almost like, I think we were like, what, 600K, 700K DAU we had at that point. And after almost 5 years of declining, we made the game grow up. And how did we do that? By making sure people don't have to pay for everything, and they can actually, maybe unlock some stuff by progressing in the game and being able to just do more actions in the game and being able to unlock more rewards rather than just saying, hey, this is there, you pay us dollars or you won't get access to this content.
Right.
So we saw much, much higher jump in engagement there. So, which was one big, inner belief I anyways had that got confirmed for me, where you have to put the player experience and the player fun first, because what you are building is entertainment, and entertainment is essentially escape, right? Like you're just trying to forget about the hard day you had today, or maybe someone's not well in your family, or you have some other issues. Whatever you're doing, you're trying to escape from something. Mm-hmm. So that was our thinking that, hey, I want to make something new. And try something, building something new. And that's why I sort of moved out of Zynga at that point. I think we were just two dreamers trying to build something too big for our shoes. So it seemed like a challenge that a 25, 26-year-old would take up on that time. Not anymore. I think I would probably be a lot wiser and have a few words to say to my younger self.
Right.
Have you even thought about how much it is going to cost to build a MOBA on mobile? Have you really thought it through? So that's what I would say.
Right. Although sometimes it's better not to know, because otherwise you would just not do it, right?
Yeah, the Dunning-Kruger effect.
But maybe the other question I can ask you is if you were to kind of generalize to India, in the Indian game development scene for new games, not live ops, but for new game development is relatively young. And if you were to think about maybe some of the both positive and maybe areas of improvement for the Indian game development ecosystem in order to become like, at the level of being world class, competing against all the top game studios, the Activision Blizzards, the Timmy Tencents of the world. Like, where do you think, from your perspective, where do you think India game developers need to improve, and what are they doing well?
So I think there are a couple of things that are working very well for India. Mm-hmm. We have extremely good talent pools in engineering, art, as well as product. But the other central function for game development, which is design, we are lacking quite behind on. And that's the number one challenge. I think most companies who are trying to build something that is not just like a board game or like an app, but something more large scale and immersive is the number one challenge that they face. That, hey, I have folks who can make great art, I have folks who can write great code, but what is the gameplay? Right. So that's where I think is the biggest bottleneck right now in the Indian talent pool. And the other big sort of, I think, choke point right now for the Indian industry to sort of break out is also availability of capital, where a lot of the new guys that are coming in, the games industry's model itself has changed in the last couple of years post IDFA. So everybody is sort of reevaluating playbooks right now and seeing, okay, what's going to work, what's not going to work. So capital is also very small amount of capital is being chased by a lot of startups. So that's one bottleneck for us. But I think what you are doing is the thing we need the most right now in the ecosystem.
Okay, what am I doing?
You're bringing in talent from outside in India, and having these interactions with talent in India that helps expedite learning, right? Because the ecosystem on its own is only going to grow at so much pace.
Right.
If you bring in people who've already been there, done that, and have solved, problems I'm going to face for the next 2 years, 1 hour of conversation is going to save me so much hassle,
Sure.
So there's a lot of such kind of things that happen where, and that is the reason that games is also a knowledge-driven economy, right? Like the entire industry is knowledge-driven economy, where 6 people can do way more damage than 100 people if they know what they're doing, rather than if they sort of know what they're doing.
Right. I think to your point, there are sometimes critical pieces of information or knowledge that can be used to help drive a product to be successful.
Yeah.
And just to elaborate on the point in terms of trying to bring more specific experts to train India, I feel that could be a great way of accelerating in the Indian game development scene. That's what we did. When I worked at a company called FunPlus, we had what I call leads-based models, bringing people to Beijing. The Koreans brought Brendan Green over to make PUBG. Also, there are rumors that, Apple and Matchington Mansion, they brought folks from GM City to train that Chinese team on Match 3. So I do think that's a model. Hopefully that can work, and hopefully we can see more of that here. But maybe one last question about India would be, what do you look forward to, like when you think about the Indian game development market or the ecosystem in terms of the future? What are you looking forward to?
So the same way, like I mentioned, that you cannot today imagine in India without its Bollywood movies. Mm-hmm. I dream of an India where you cannot imagine its global identity without Indian games.
Right.
that's the dream for us,
Okay.
right?
So you want to be RRR for games.
Inshallah, maybe
Okay.
not. We just try to put our head down and do our work and listen to what our players say, and that's a very simple rule we try and follow by. So,
Okay, awesome. Well, Mayur, maybe the very last question is, so for folks in the audience who are interested in finding out more information about Mayanagari,
yeah.
and maybe website or things like that, or how can people get in touch with you? How can people find out more about your game?
Right. So you can find out about our game on our website, Hypernova Interactive, or just search for Mayanagari on Google. You'll find everything you need. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm most active on LinkedIn and Twitter. Just search for my name. It's fairly unique.
I'll leave links.
Yeah, it's fairly unique. You'll find it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Mayur, and for our audience. We'll catch you next time.